Hi, JF, and welcome to the show.
Hey, Ward. Good to see you.
I was hoping just to start the show with a bit of information on your background and your career so far. Look, we've known each other for, I don't know, maybe 18 months or so now. You've been in and around the industry for a long time, a well-known figure in the space. But for those who aren't familiar with you, I think you've had a fascinating career. Spent a lot of your career in the US, and pretty unique in that you started sell side, then moved buy side for a long time, and now you've come full circle back onto the sell side for a developer. So could you maybe talk us through that evolution of your career through to what you're doing today?
Yeah, a lot of my career is really in my sports background. So I played basketball in college, and once I stopped growing vertically but horizontally, I pivoted to business school, business background, and then a master's in negotiation. And loved the United States. Always wanted to be in the United States, so moved and got into telecom first. Stick to the telecom even during the .com era. But then it was a time to go do something else, and telecom was not going the right way. So I got into a small company called Raging Wire, which we all know as NTT data center. Rapidly got addicted to that vertical. Did a few different roles in selling capacity and data centers. But in 2011, a company we used to refer to as the book company called me, and I won't forget what the recruiter say. Do you want to come and do the carbon copy of what you're doing today? And thought, that sounds odd. And buy data center space. And they explained to me they had this excess data center capacity that they wanted to sell over the internet, use the internet as an operating system. It just felt so risky that I jumped into it. Spent 10 years at Amazon, had a great time. We only have 20 or 30 minutes, so I'm not going to tell you all the things that I've done, but I've touched to a host of different things, build the edge team, build a vendor management program, which is still in use today, manage the co-location engineers, global planning. At the 6-year mark, took a break, went to retail, helping startups grow on Amazon. I think everybody should experience the retail side of Amazon at some point in their career, because it's boot camp into focusing on delivery. I think once you're in technology, it's a little bit like The Godfather. So I got sucked back into AWS, first through the public sector side of the house. Shout out to John Brennan, who's now at NVIDIA, by the way. And we worked on a few great things in the public sector. And public sector in the United States was primed to consume cloud services. And then eventually made it back to infrastructure, working on the decentralized cloud product, Outpost, Wavelength, and the local zone. 10 years, a long time at Amazon. Actually, one of the team that had won a deal against us on the public sector side at Microsoft reached out to me, and it was an opportunity to go and learn new things. So I left to go to Microsoft. It was a learning experience. First, focusing on the way they build regions, and then over the last 18 months of my career, focusing on OpenAI and ChatGPT capacity.
I seem to remember you telling me that you were one of the first people into that infra organization within AWS, like one of the first hires.
I recall celebrating when the stock passed 100. I recall our first all hands. We were such a small team that we were in a movie theater. It's weird to remember Amazon data centers when they were majority for retail, and a section of the data center was for AWS. I remember racks being single corded, all that kind of things. The data center standards, the security standard changing. It was really a fun ride, and I look fondly on those moments. I loved every minute at AWS, and it's just that 10 years was time, right? A decade in one place is plenty of time.
Just given that experience, you've really had a front row seat to the entire evolution of the industry over the last over that period of time. So talk to us a little bit more about what led to you joining.
What I do now?
Greenscale and what you're doing at the moment.
Fair. As we were addressing the needs of AI at Microsoft, I did see a trend. I thought at first it was a typo the day someone told me that a rack was 120 kW. I was so used to, the 10, the 8 to 15 commercial cloud rack. So I thought, whoa, this is different. I started to look into this, and I thought, this is not going to go away, and capacity is becoming a problem. As a matter of fact, we used to say, where's the network? Now we're saying at Microsoft, if you don't have line of sight to 100 megawatt, you don't really have a data center. I saw a lot of my colleagues and peers jumping back to the sell side. So I thought, well, there's something there. Then the last trend I observed was, since Interaction became Digital Realty and Telecity became Equinix, there's not an obvious European born and raised data center company. I started to call a couple of friends like-minded who introduced me to a couple of other friends. I eventually met a gentleman called Zal Limbuwala, who's at DTCP. He wanted to do things differently. And so it became a back and forth conversation, talking to all the folks at DTCP, which is our owner, our private equity owner. And eventually I thought, well, this makes sense. So I packed my bags from Seattle and moved to London in June of last year.
You've certainly spoken to me before around some of the focus that Greenscale has towards sustainability. And helping to solve some of the challenges that the industry is facing from that point of view. So can you maybe talk to us a little bit about that as well?
Yeah, look, at the end of the day, we all build data centers, right? But you have to have different use cases, or you have different views on how you're going to go after it, right? There's just been a lot of suboptimal press about data centers, and how they take from communities. And we could argue that, right? I think data centers are extremely efficient, much more efficient than your server room that you used to have back before cloud and colo and data centers. But anyway, one of the things that became clear to us, right, is that we need to put the data center at the center of the community, right? Having play an active role in grid distribution. All those racks, from AI are generating quite a bit of heat. So we incorporate into our data center design, ways to reuse that excess heat. So all those different aspects that are rooted into two pillars, right? One is scale for good, right? It's our social aspect of it, as well as, and the number one is green infrastructure, right? So it's our environmental pillar. How do we maximize or minimize, I should say, actually, the impact of a data center on the community?
Look, I understand that whenever I have these conversations, there's usually some information that he might not be able to share that's not in the public domain. But can you talk to me a little bit about what Greenscale have done so far, and what the roadmap looks like over the next few years?
We have 12 elements that we're tracking. I just referred to the two pillars, but one of them is transparency. So I'll be as transparent as I can until, NDAs come in the way. First, we need to not forget that we're not even a year old, right? We're still a few months away from that. So it feels like it's been a decade, which just shows how busy we are. Again, going back to my conversation with the folks at DTCP and Zal and a few other friends who are count as colleagues now, there's different ways to start a company, right? You can start and give them a bunch of money, and then they will go and find sites. Or you can give them a combination of money and sites. And I have to say, the folks at DTCP were pretty visionary and gifted us 2 sites that are consistent with our ethos, right? Scalable, renewable power. So we're building 100 megawatt in Northern Ireland. And it's Northern Ireland, right? Still in the UK. There's just it's just not Dublin. And then another site which is 300 MVA in Norway, which is power has been committed. It's in a queue. And what's exciting about Northern Ireland is we have a substation on site. So we're going to be one of the few to have capacity in the very later part of 2026 for Northern Ireland, and shooting a year later for capacity in Norway. I've hired a team to do site selections, right? My bread and butter. So we're looking at a couple of other markets that we will announce fairly soon.
Like I was saying earlier, you had a front row seat to the whole evolution of cloud over the years. And you were in the States when the huge AI boom started. Give us your perspective on how you feel AI is like reshaping the overall data center landscape.
If you go back all the way to the 80s, your first cloud is your mainframe. The next 86 is your decentralized platform. And then you have the network, right, which is ATM. And then you have IPVPN. And then you had the cloud. And then we had IoT just 3.5 years ago. And now we have AI. So you see trends of compression, decentralization, compression, decentralization. The cycle tends to shorten, right? I think AI, much like cloud, impacted the data center world 15 years ago. 15 years ago, you would see data centers downtown commonly, right? Or at the skirt of the city and in secondary market. All the small mom and pop data center companies disappeared. I think AI is reshaping data center infrastructure a bit the same way, right? It's clear that if you don't have a path to the chipset, right, you may not see a contract renewal in a year or two when your contract with a large hyperscaler expires, right? So it's interesting to see how rapidly data center standards are changing all the way to the hardware, right? A commercial cloud racks last, contract for that last 10, 15 years. You also see GPU racks, having a lifespan of 3 to 5 years. So aligning those standards, aligning the infrastructure, force you to have an agile infrastructure, which is what we're really focusing on here.
You've also got a quite unique perspective from an international point of view because, born and raised in France, but spent the majority of your career in the States. If we go back to certainly your time at AWS being one of the first into that infrastructure team, doing a hell of a lot of work globally in that organization. Can you maybe give us some of your perspective on how you see some of this, how you see some of the landscape playing out in Europe versus the US, and any nuances that you see?
I think the pace at which the United States is leading, right, the AI revolution. I mean, people talk gigawatt like it's no big deal. Europe needs to change, right? Europe needs to be a lot more agile, flexible in regulation. I know it's Europe, but no two countries are having the same regulation. It's just so hard. I know I am French, born, raised, but I think more as an American. As a matter of fact, I do have an American passport. I'm just amazed by how hard it is to do business at times. The good news for selfishly Greenscale, right? We put community such at the heart of our strategy. We don't see pushback as others may. But just generally speaking, you can take a design. Look, you can take a design from Northern Virginia and your hyperscaler, you could put it anywhere in the United States. You can't really do this in Europe, right? You have to give things, whether it's going to be noise pollution or complain about the height of your data center or, just all those things. It's nowhere, there's no two country alike, even though it's Europe.
Yeah, we're seeing that same thing play out because even though we've done work in 16 countries, the last 3 years it's been so US centric just because, as you've just said, the demand there is just outpacing anything anywhere else in the world at the moment. So I always finish the podcast on the same question. Could you give me your opinion on what you think people in the industry aren't talking about that you think they should be?
I think there's two things that people are not talking about. They're not talking about 2028, and they're not talking about commercial cloud. On the hyperscaler side, right? How do we, a neo cloud? Let's not forget that they're the one driving the change. How do they deploy as fast as possible to monetize AI, right? As a result, you almost cease to exist if you mention that your capacity is going to come in the later part of 2027, right? The obsession right now is we need capacity and water enough, right? So it's all about how fast can you stage your data center, how fast can you deploy. And to address that need internally, we actually took a deep and serious look at prefab, and we have some great announcement coming up. But going back to your question, right? There is a 2028 not one person that I'm talking to right now even think about 2028. And that's concerning. I was catching up with a friend in Seattle last week who used to run real estate at Amazon and at Microsoft. And we came to the same conclusion, right? There's a 2028 and 9 and 30, right? What are we going to do about it? The problem is by the time this conversation is over, the power per rack might have increased tenfold. So then how do we incorporate that? So anyway, long-term planning, long-range planning today look like the beep of somebody having a heart attack, right? Demand is up, it's down, it's up, it's down. What do? We put this on the LOI. No, we don't want to do that. And then you have a slew of negative articles that are not digging under the surface. But anyway, long-term planning is one thing we're not thinking about, and just simple commercial cloud, right? It's still growing. AI is leveraging some of its infrastructure and capability. Even Intel is planning wireless to the chipset. We know Intel is powering racks of several of the hyperscalers. So how are we going to incorporate this too, right? At what time the infrastructure is going to be fungible? And complementary. These are some of the things that I don't hear. Actually, I was in Seattle, so I'm referring a lot to conversation I had last week, but I was catching up with a friend of mine and looking at how to build an infrastructure, Microsoft, that is not only for Microsoft, but let's pretend they don't want it, right? It could go to another company, and she's leading cross-functionally a conversation there. And I think we need to have this conversation, right? We can't only look at be one type of design. We've looked at the commonality across all the hyperscalers in NeoCloud to make sure that we don't make one-way door conversations, right? Decisions, sorry. So we try to build up to 80%, 90%, and then customize at the last minute. Easier said than done. But again, back to the question, commercial cloud is still growing. Commercial cloud infrastructure will evolve. How does the two work together, right? And what does the rack, and I'll have a follow-up with you maybe in 3 years, right? But what does a commercial cloud rack looks like? What does it look like in 3 years? I'd be curious.
Fantastic. Well, look, JF, it's always a real pleasure talking to you. Always find it insightful. Really wish you and the rest of the Greenscale team all the best as you continue to build out the platform.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you very much.
Good talking to you.